I literally, I stopped. I just like broke down. I started crying. And I'm tearing up now just for our world. What is happening. And that's why this is so important.
Did you push record?
Thanks so much for tuning into Our Second Act with Paige and Silka.
For your second act of life. Hey, Silka.
Hi, Paige. Paige, today a little bit off topic from our usual love and relationships, back to emotional health, specifically the current pandemic and how that is affecting everybody. The world has changed as we know it where we sit right now. And while you and I talked off camera, while really in the global scheme, only a small amount of people are affected with the virus, everybody's affected with the psychological stress. And one of the reasons that we wanted to talk about this, most people don't realize that you are a traumatic stress and integrative healing consultant who has been at ground zero of some of our biggest traumatic events in history, including 9/11. So let me throw it over to you, because I know this is a very important topic close to your heart, and something that hopefully we can help people put together a psychological toolkit in addition to everything else they're putting together at the stores.
Yeah, right. So just so people know as well that, at my time at the Pentagon, I was on the mass cal team, and that's for mass casualty. We did biochem, pandemic, different kinds of things that could happen. And of course, I ran all of the psychological component, which is a huge piece that no one talks about until it's later down the road and there's been psychological collateral damage. So yes, right on, Silka. We're going to talk about what's a psychological toolkit that you can put together for this pandemic. So we might go a little bit all over the place in this, so just kind of follow along, everyone. So I wrote a few things down that I wanted to tell everyone that's really important in the psychological component. And the first thing is communication. And as our mobility is decreased and people become isolated, communication via our devices is crucial for friends and family and connection. So your laptops, your computers, your phones, it's really important to keep them charged. If you don't have Skype already, put it on. If you don't have WhatsApp, put it on your phone. And the reason why is to have these devices just in case your provider goes down for a short amount of time. It's important to have those type of devices that will be able to work. Number two is be diligent about the guidelines that you're being told. The personal separation sometimes, the distancing, that's, helpful. And, percentages and stats will be changing. But the most current stat that I had received from the CDC was that about 80% of folks that are exposed have minimal or no symptoms at all. However, our population moving forward, 70s, 80s, they are really a big part of the target audience to be careful of. So just remember that for exposure, be careful who you're being around. And it's really okay to make sure that if you're in businesses, to make sure you say you have respiratory symptoms. Please, it's not important to come into work right now. We can do virtual, things like that. And a big thing is stay positively occupied, both mentally and physically. Positively occupied. Does it mean you keep the TV in the background running 24/7? Because here's the thing. The world that we live in long before the pandemic began was very fear-based. The media is all about fear, 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 fear. So I'll just take a pause for a moment, Silka, and you can jump in.
Well, to me, this is, it's surreal. And I personally experienced, as everybody else has in their own way, how important it is that we talk about this.
Yeah.
The last time I shopped was a week ago, and it's was starting to, it was no big deal. There was a few empty shelves here and there. And then the second time was this weekend. I was shocked. I was almost crippled. It was in the afternoon, so the store had already, it was Ralph's, had already been wiped out, but it wasn't this rush of people, that you see on the news. It was like zombies. People couldn't understand, like, what is going on, just slowly moving with the cart. I literally, I stopped. I just like broke down. I started crying. I'm tearing up now just for our world. what is happening, and that's why this is so important, that we get our thoughts, our emotions, get that psychological toolkit to get through this, because that's going to last a lot longer than anyone actually affected by the virus, is what I believe.
Yeah, and it's interesting you said the grocery store, because I went last night, and it was, I do improv,
Right.
and it was like everything that happened last night at the grocery store. I thought, oh my gosh, this would be an incredible improv skit.
Yeah.
But just two things that came out. One guy decided to blast music while going through the grocery store, and the song that he had on was "It's the End of the World as We Know It." And although some people were laughing, other people were really affected by it. And number two, as I was going down the aisle, there was a woman and her significant other and two small kids, and she was walking around like, why are the shelves empty? What's going on? Should we go to a different grocery store? And I said, do you know what's going on? And she's like, well, I know there's some kind of illness. So two totally different takes of what people were going through in the grocery store. And then one kind of comical thing, because I think it's also good to have some lightness, is I stopped one of the stock people and asked them if they had any ricotta cheese so I could make some lasagna. And he said, we don't have any left, but I have a consolation prize for you. Do you want to come with me? And I went, well, sure. And I was really curious, what's the consolation prize? So I took my cart and I went behind him, and he went behind the doors in the stock room, and I waited, and he comes out. And what do you think he came out with?
I don't know.
Toilet paper. And I said, oh, and I wasn't even there for toilet paper, but he said, this is the last one I found. I'm going to give you this as a consolation prize. And I went, well, thank you. This is great. A consolation prize of toilet paper. And when I went up to the cashier and I'm putting my things on the belts, the cashier went and grabbed it and held it up for everyone and said, where did you get this? I thought we were out. And I was like, oh my gosh, this sums everything up as the consolation prize of toilet paper. So amidst the seriousness of what's going on, there also has to be a balance of some type of, brevity in what's going on as well, too.
Yeah. Well, how do we fill out our toolkit?
Okay. So number one thing is, like I talked about, communication, and I gave tips on that. Number two, go out in nature. Why is that so important? Because nature, believe it or not, and I teach this in some of my trainings to practitioners because of some of the different work that I do. Nature has a cycle of what we call the breath of life. And believe it or not, the cycle that it has matches the breath and the fluids in our body. So when you go outside and it's very calming, it's actually hooking up with our autonomic nervous system, which can take us into fight or flight, lots of fear and anxiety. So when you go outside, your nervous system is now connecting into the breath of life that's in nature, that's calming within the first 3 to 5 minutes. So being out in nature, standing in nature, sitting in nature is extremely calming to calm the anxiety and the fear down. That's number two. TV, you don't need to have it on all the time, at least as far as like news, media, scare, they're shutting down. Remember this, they're shutting things down to help the exposure. They're shutting things down so it doesn't go on as far and as deep as maybe it has in Italy and in China. They're trying to get ahead of, the 8 ball right now. So just remember that. The next tip, and this is, Paige's tip of what I've seen through doing this work for decades, is that, when things like this happen, it felt very familiar, and it feels very familiar to me to 9/11. Planes didn't fly. People stayed home. And when they stayed home, something really special started to happen. They started to reconnect with themselves. They started to reconnect with loved ones. And doing that There's something called interpersonal neurobiology, which I also teach. And it's about the communication and how your nervous system hooks up with another person's nervous system, and how it's very calming to reconnect with people that you love. Because we live in a world of go, go, go and being on devices all the time. Yet this time when you're on devices to reconnect and to slow down. And it forces you to slow down, which calms down the anxiety, which calms down the fear, and it gets you to interconnect. So I'll take another pause for a moment before I go on there, Silka.
No, yes, exactly. You have to. The social isolation causes depression, and that's, we want to avoid that at all costs. So yes, I agree with you.
So another thing is, and we've done our online training on chakras, but there's pieces in our online training that also are really important to breath work that calms the autonomic system down, that calms anxiety down, that calms fear down. There's also different types of mantras and affirmations, and I believe we're going to put something together,
Yeah.
Specifically for how to use these tips and these techniques while we're living in a world of pandemic, which they'll be able to get that. You'll be able to send links on that, Ursoka?
Yes, I'm going to jump on that this afternoon. So hopefully that'll be real. I'll put it in the video description as soon as it's ready.
Okay, yeah. But these are all things to make you remember that you're safe. And there's a bigger picture involved here. And I'm going to bring this in. You have to decide and figure out, where are you with your faith, whether it's religious, spiritual, whatever it might be, because these are the times too to kind of remind yourself and step into that a little bit more, that there is a bigger picture. There is a bigger message that goes along with this. So like any illness, any injury, any trauma, any pandemic, what's the message that maybe you personally are learning about yourself, or learning that maybe you want to start doing more of after this pandemic starts to settle down and life goes back to a little bit normal type of routine? So kind of sit back and feel and notice, or pray, whatever you do something that feels good, do something that feels calming, that feels reassuring. Because when we come from a place of fear, you will not be able to make decisions that are clear. You will not be able to act clearly when it comes from fear as well. So remember that. Routine is very important. It makes people feel safe. If things get shut down and you aren't able to go into the gym, or maybe work says you have to be home for a while, create a new routine for yourself and kind of get excited about it. Okay, I can't go out. Wow, I've always wanted some time off. What do I want to do at home? Like, I have my paints here. Go ahead and paint, go outside, create something new at home for yourself. Maybe you want to do some new cooking. Maybe there's knitting, whatever there is. Start to develop a new normal routine that works for you, that calms anxiety and it calms fear and it actually feels good and gives you pleasure. That's very important too. So I'll take a pause there as well.
Well, I think that really, really great information, obviously, and as it pertains to our age group, because we are affected with this more, both in the term, in the potential physiological danger, as well as, of course, the emotional and everything you've just said. We get closer to our faith. We do that anyway as we age, but when you're faced with something like this, it just. Yeah, it really throws you for a loop, and putting a positive spin on it or looking at what we can learn from it is certainly great advice. Is there anything else that you would like to leave our viewers with?
No, just know that, I know I've said it before, but remember and always check yourself. Am I living from fear, or am I living from trust? And you might say, oh, well, I don't know, the information coming out, I don't know what to trust, but you can trust yourself in this. When you have guidelines, you can follow them, you can trust yourself, you can put things into place that make you and your family feel better and have a little bit of joy. So there's lots of different things that you can do for yourself while you're trying to stay healthy. And if you do have symptoms, there's things that you can do for yourself as well. So don't forget that you do have ultimate control in an environment that might feel out of control.
Okay. Well, and with that, we'll see you next time on Our Second Act with Paige and Silka.
For your second act of life. Bye.
For more videos on taking charge of your emotional health after 50, please visit our website, secondact.tv. And if you have a suggestion on a topic that you'd like us to cover, we do have a suggestion box on the upper right-hand corner of the website, a little red box. Just click on there, drop us a line. We'd love to hear from you. See you next time.